Hello, it's Robert Schwemmer and welcome to my channel. In this video we are going to explore the history of the ship Cuba and its wrecking off San Miguel Island, which is located off the northern Channel Islands in Santa Barbara County, California. On September 8th, 2023, we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the loss of the ship Cuba. The German-designed and built steamer was launched as the Coblenz at the Hamburg shipyard of Blohm and Voss on March 18, 1897, having a registered gross tonnage of 3,139, a length of 307.7 feet, a depth of hold of 24.7 feet, and a breadth of 42.2 feet. The shipbuilding firm, which has survived 2 world wars, is still in existence today. It is recognized for building many prominent vessels, such as the German battleship Bismarck and the sailing vessel Horst Wessel, now known as the United States Coast Guard training ship Eagle. Coblenz completed sea trials and was delivered on May 5, 1897 to the Norddautacher Lloyd of Bremen as an ocean-going passenger steamer. Later in Coblenz's career, the steamer ran the Imperial Postal Service on the South Sea Line from Australia to Japan. The vessel had accommodations for 54 passengers, including a saloon. Cargo holds were located just behind the forecastle, where a portion of the crew was housed, and there were additional crew accommodations and cargo storage in the stern area of the ship. When the United States entered World War I, Coblenz was in a Philippine port and was seized as a war prize. The passenger steamer was admitted to American registry under a joint resolution of Congress on May 12, 1917, and given the new name Sachem, and was taken over by the United States Shipping Board. Pacific Mail Steamship Company purchased Sachem from the United States Shipping Board on February 6, 1920 for $400,000. Sachem operated for several months on the Pacific Mail's service between San Francisco and Havana, Cuba, carrying passengers and cargo. A 1920 Pacific Mail Steamship Company publication revealed the company's desire to change the Indian name Sachem to Cuba. The publication goes on to state, and I quote, "The first trip of the vessel was completed on her return to San Francisco, and it was most gratifying to the company to hear her so highly spoken of by the full list of passengers, as all on board were enthusiastic about the accommodations, cuisine, and personnel. Carrying 3,000 tons of freight and 51 first-class passengers, of whom 7 are booked for Havana." End quote. In February 1921, Pacific Mail Steamship Company transferred Cuba to a new service between San Francisco and Cristobal. Cuba ran alongside the Pacific Mail Steamship Company's steamers Newport, City of Paria, San Juan, and San Jose. Together, the 4 small passenger cargo steamers offered service every 15 days between Panama, Mexico, and California. The Marine Exchange's vessel arrival and departure records for the port of San Francisco revealed that Cuba also completed cruises to Baltimore and Honolulu for the Pacific Mail Steamship Company. In early September 1923, Cuba departed the Panama Canal Zone en route to San Francisco. It reached Mazatlan, Mexico after a brief stopover. The ship departed the Mexican port on September 3rd. Working up the coast, the passenger steamer encountered thick fog and was forced to navigate by dead reckoning, which is basically navigating by course, speed, and time elapsed without a fix on land for the next 3 days. The ship's radio was not working, and there were no spare parts on board to fix the problem. On September 7th, Captain Charles J. Holland, master of the Cuba, retired for the night, leaving orders to be rousted if visibility was less than 5 or 6 miles, and in no case later than 3 a.m. in order to take soundings. Second Officer John Roca was now in command. First Officer Weiss arrived in the wheelhouse to take over the watch at 4 a.m. and discovered the visibility had been reduced to less than 4 miles. Realizing that the second officer was still in charge and there was no sign of the captain, Weiss immediately went to the captain. The radio operator recalled the moment the captain entered the wheelhouse, and I quote, "The captain was already on the bridge, his shoes merely slipped on with his suspenders hanging over his hips, and was taking charge of the vessel," end quote. Captain Holland directed an immediate turn to port, westward, and at that very moment the vessel struck a reef about a quarter-mile off Point Bennett, San Miguel Island. Captain Holland then ordered reverse engines, and Cuba briefly refloated, but was swung around by the seas and ran into the submerged reef stern first, demolishing the two twin propellers. The steamer was now listing to port in rough seas, causing complications in launching the starboard lifeboats, which had to be dragged across the vessel to the port davits. Cuba's cargo included silver bullion, so Captain Holland, the purser, the steward, and 8 crewmen remained aboard to guard the cargo, while the rest of the crew and passengers took to the lifeboats. Lifeboats number 4 and 5, with 25 survivors, put upon the beach at Point Bennett after dealing with some aggressive sea lions. Lifeboat number 3, with 13 people and commanded by First Officer Weiss, headed east along the south side of San Miguel Island, then through the San Miguel Passage, entering the Santa Barbara Channel. This lifeboat had a brief encounter with some troublesome whales, but eventually the crewmen hailed the Standard Oil tanker W.S. Miller, which transported them to San Francisco. Lifeboat number 2, with 22 survivors, commanded by Chief Engineer W.J. Owens, along with Lifeboat number 1, with 24 survivors, and commanded by Second Officer John Rohai, in charge, were on a compass course heading west, out to sea rather than towards the mainland, due to compass reversal, which is basically human error in reading the true compass course. The USS Reno, part of destroyer Squadron 11, on a high-speed endurance run en route to San Diego from San Francisco, had slowed down its speed near the western region of the Santa Barbara Channel when encountering visibility less than 1/2 mile. At 2:15 p.m., the USS Reno quartermaster spotted lifeboat number 1 heading to sea, and then lifeboat number 2. Both boats were rigged with sails and heading west. At 9 p.m. on that same day, destroyer squadrons 11 and 12, a flotilla of destroyers heading south to San Diego from San Francisco, would make a fatal error in navigation and run into the mainland north of San Miguel Island. This resulted in the loss of 7 U.S. Navy destroyers and the lives of 23 sailors. Ironically, the Navy officers first thought they had overshot the western entrance to the Santa Barbara Channel and were aground on San Miguel Island. In reality, when the destroyers made the course change intending to enter the channel, the squadron was too far north and went aground at Point Pedernales. There is speculation that additional radio traffic during the Cuba rescue may have played a role in the lead destroyer error in navigation, since the Navy was using RDF, or Radio Direction Finder. This event is still on record as the U.S. Navy's worst peacetime disaster and with respect to loss of ships. Cuba's entire crew and passengers were saved, along with the cargo of mahogany, silver, and coffee. Second Officer John Roca was blamed by a court inquiry for the Cuba stranding. His license was suspended for 90 days. Boat owners from the local community, most notably Captain Irie Eaton of Santa Barbara, were engaged in removing cargo and vessel equipment from the shipwreck. Insurance records indicate, as of December 9, 1923, the amount collected by Pacific Mail Steamship Company for the loss of the Cuba was $275,684.44. The USS Selfridge arrived on September 9, 1923, and picked up the remaining crew and silver bullion from San Miguel Island. The steamer Venezuela eventually transported the silver bullion and passengers to San Francisco. During the early part of the 20th century, San Miguel Island ranchers were dependent on small boats for their supplies to ferry livestock to and from the mainland. So when a vessel was shipwrecked at the island, it was as though a floating hardware store was set up for business. San Miguel Island occupants most certainly would have profited from earlier shipwreck events, using those materials either for personal use or building materials. In the 1930s, Herbert Lester, known as King of San Miguel Island, was manager for island operations, living on the island with his wife and 2 daughters. The young sister's life of being raised on the island had become quite the novelty with the local media, and there were lots of photographs that captured their life. Photographs of the family at their home on the island also recorded some relics salvaged from the shipwreck Cuba that were put into use at the ranch house. The Lester family collection of photographs record the still functioning ship safe from the Cuba in the living room. In the ruins of the ranch that burned down in 1967, there's evidence of these small sinks that were recovered and used from the staterooms of the Cuba. I've seen the same style of sink at the underwater shipwreck site. Further examination of the photographs, we also see that there's documentation of portholes being used as windows in the ranch house. This type of porthole was used on a wooden vessel, not a steel vessel like the Cuba. It may have been recovered from 2 sailing vessels wrecked on the island, shipwrecks J.M. Coleman and Comet in earlier years. Fortunately, some of these rare artifacts from the Cuba have made it to the mainland, and you can actually see the ship's bell on display at the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, and the safe and other artifacts, as well as the Santa Cruz Island Foundation. Check out the California Island Center in Carpinteria. The submerged shipwreck Cuba lies today in the waters of the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary and Channel Islands National Park, providing recreational opportunities for the sport diving community. 100 years after the stranding, in a region that's impacted year-round by large prevailing ocean swells, the level of preservation is remarkable. This may be due in part to the German ingenuity and the quality of construction that went into building the Cuba. The 2 triple expansion steam engines still sit upright 14 feet off the seafloor, and just behind the engines is the 15-foot 6-inch diameter Scotch boilers. The Cuba site is probably the most consolidated and organized of all the major shipwreck sites in the sanctuary and park. Let's go take a dive on the Cuba. Well, I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the history of the steamship Cuba, and a shallow dive to the dive site, and a little ranching history of San Miguel Island. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you consider subscribing, and a big thanks to my loyal subscribers. And of course, I do enjoy those likes. Thank you.